My name is John Passfield. The title of this reading will be L.M. Montgomery Video 23, Testimonials Part 2. So here is my novel, L.M. Montgomery, I Gave You Life, a novel by John Passfield. The photograph is of the historical L.M. Montgomery, the author, about 1938. Now in 1938, with another world war looming and her own personal problems threatening to overwhelm her, acclaimed Canadian author L.M. Montgomery begins to write what she has decided will be her final Anne novel, the final novel in which Anne will be a character. As she works on the new book, she recalls the days when Anne of Green Gables became a worldwide literary phenomenon and the dilemma that she faced at that time, whether to write a series of novels in which Anne would perpetually remain the child whom the world had come to know and to love, or to allow Anne to grow to adulthood with all the agonizing torments of the one who had given her life, L.M. Montgomery. So in my novel, she is an author writing a novel. The novel that she is writing is this one, Anne of Ingleside. Whoops, I'm holding it upside down. Anne of Ingleside. She is writing this for like 16 chapters of thought in my novel. By the time we get to chapter 16, she has finished Anne of Ingleside. All that time, she's thinking of the novel in which Anne was a brand new character. She's writing in 1938. She's remembering 1905 when she was writing Anne of Green Gables. So Anne is a little girl, but she's a fictional little girl. So unlike an actual parent with an actual child, she did have the choice of keeping Anne as a child and not letting her grow up. Now in 1938, having had a very difficult adulthood in her own opinion, she's wondering whether she made the right choice. Maybe I should have kept Anne as a little child when there were problems, but all the problems were solvable. In a previous video presentation, I read 4 of the 7 testimonials in the novel. A testimonial is a technical device by which the main character of a novel attempts to see himself or herself from an objective point of view by either recalling what another character has said or creating what an imaginary character might say about the main character. In this video presentation, I will read 3 more testimonials. So, let's go to page 78 for the first one. Here it is. A testimonial, a minor character talking about the main character. Maud was suffering, I believe, quite crushed by her ouster from the executive of the CAA, that's the Canadian Authors Association. She used to invite me to her house, told me I shouldn't be seen chatting with her at the meetings. The moderns might purge me from a Politburo, as they had with her. Very kind to young writers she was, encouraging those who were on the way up. Lots of ideas for the CAA, the Canadian Authors Association. Told me to take her suggestions as my own. Nobody listens anymore to old fogies like me. Her husband would grunt if he had to talk. I only saw him once or twice. I couldn't tell whether he noticed me at all. She introduced me to him as if he was wallpaper. Didn't seem to expect him to talk. She told me once she kept up with the meetings as a way to get out of the house. Shopping, library, movies, occasional reading or two. She didn't seem to have any other friends. Never mentioned her sons at all. Pretty circumscribed existence. She never talked about money or sales. A quiet person who occasionally smiled. You never know that she was giving delight to thousands and thousands of readers. The readers of Anne of Green Gables who stretched around the world. Okay, that's one minor character talking about the main character, L.M. Montgomery. Let's go to page 96, 97. Here's another secondary character, minor character, speaking about her. Yeah, I was called out to fix a tire for them. Mrs. Montgomery and her husband. It was a terrible rainy night, dark as pitch out in the highway. Got a phone call from someone who lives on that road. It was Mrs. Montgomery who came to the door. I was told her husband just sat like a lump the whole time in the car. Well, not when I was there. Here I am taking off the tire and trying to put on a patch, in the pouring rain, mind you, and the husband up and shouts that he's being pursued. Pursued by what, I wondered. Anyway, here it is pouring rain, and Mrs. Montgomery is off in the dark, calling out to her husband to come back and get in the car. So I offers to help her out. He was a little ways down the road, but she says, No, you fix the tire. I'm fine on my own. Well, a nightmare if there ever was one. I got the flat all patched and pumped her up and put the tire back on. Then she gets him in the car and he don't want to drive. I assume she didn't know how to drive, so she's coaxing him. She told me they started off from Leaksdale at 11 o'clock. That's just a little ways down the road. They should have been home in about 2 hours, and here the clock was pushing 6 a.m. Anyways, off they goes. And then the next time I seen them was when I went to their church. I had a niece that was being baptized, and I said hello. The husband said hello and all. If there was anything wrong with him, you'd never know. Mrs. Montgomery, well, she was polite, but that was all. And then the last one I'm going to read is page 114. Oops, a little elusive. Okay, and here it is. It's the last testimonial of 7 in the novel. Mrs. Montgomery has to be about the most normal person one could ever expect to meet. Amazing when you think that she's a best-selling author with a string of books that are being read around the world. The creator of the immortal Anne of PEI. I just happened to be sitting next to her at one of these functions. There was a delay in serving the main course, a problem in the kitchen, I believe. Do you have a family, Mrs. Montgomery? I tentatively asked. Oh, yes, I have a husband and 2 boys. That's all I asked, but she offered more information, as easy as you please. My husband was a minister, retired now for a number of years. My oldest son is studying law. My youngest son is studying medicine. I don't live far from here, close enough to Toronto to remain within the orbit of the literary scene. I like to write and to garden. I divide my time between the two. A quiet life is best for the writing. Don't you agree? She kept folding the edge of the tablecloth as she talked, folding and unfolding and folding it again. Okay, those are 3. I've read 7 in the 2 presentations, but 3 in this presentation. Testimonials, comments by minor characters on the main character. I'm sure we're all familiar with the Christian idea that on Judgment Day, each of us will be called on to explain to God, or perhaps St. Peter, as we stand outside the gates of heaven, just how we have behaved while we've been privileged to be alive here on the planet Earth. Even without a direct reference to this particular image, I think that the concept of attempting to see oneself through the eyes of another person is a very familiar one. Such familiar concepts are often called tropes, T-R-O-P-E-S, tropes, in the literature by which we humans examine ourselves. Many of the classical characters in literature are very concerned in the last chapter of a novel or last scene of a play about what will be said about them after they are gone. Here are some examples. Number 1, we have Hamlet asking Horatio to be sure to tell his story in a way that he himself, Hamlet, would approve. Number 2, we have Othello asking those who are attending his last moments to be sure to speak of me as I am, nothing extenuate. Those are his words. Speak of me as I am, nothing extenuate. Don't add anything to what you know. 3, we have Willie Loman in Death of a Salesman claiming, I'm not a dime a dozen. He doesn't want the people after him to get the wrong idea about him and the value of his life. Number 4, we have Cleopatra dressing herself and presenting a scene which she hopes will become the image of her that the victors will pass on to posterity. Well, that is our image of her, mainly due to Shakespeare, I would say. One of the ways in which literature plays variations on this particular concept is to have the main character, instead of speaking directly about the value of his or her life, imagining what other characters are saying in the present, or imagining what other characters will say in the future after he or she has passed on from the current scene. To make this even more complicated, we have two kinds of novels and two kinds of plays. Number one, we have the explanatory novel and the explanatory play. And number two, we have the dramatic novel and the dramatic play. The first kind of novel or play, the explanatory, is easy to understand. The narrator or a character tells the reader or the viewer what to think of the main character. But the second kind of novel and play, the dramatic, is not easy to understand. There's no narrator or character to tell the reader or viewer what to think of the main character. When reading or viewing a dramatic novel or play, we have to ask ourselves two questions. One, whether the character is creating imaginary characters who are saying exactly what the main character thinks of himself or herself. Or number two, whether, because of a dark mood of the main character at the moment, or because he or she fears that this will be the case, the minor character is saying all of the worst things that could be said about the main character and none of the best. So, the task of the exploratory novel writer is to explain life to we fellow humans. The task of the dramatic novel writer is to present life to us. So that should have been explanatory novel writer. So an explanatory novel writer explains, and a dramatic novel writer presents. Hence, the explanatory novel uses a device of the reliable narrator, and the dramatic novel employs a device of the creation by the main character of the perhaps reliable and perhaps unreliable commentator. Ultimately, though, the task of every writer is to develop a form and a cluster of techniques which come as close to actual life as literature can possibly achieve. The use of the unreliable narrator in the explanatory novel is an attempt, usually subconscious, on the part of the novelist due to dissatisfaction with the shortcomings of the explanatory novel as a technical device to move closer to the advantages of the poetic novel without abandoning the comforts of the prose novel. So, this is my novel, L.M. Montgomery, I Gave You Life, a novel by John Passfield. It's found on Amazon if you want more information. It's found at Rocks Mills Press, which is my publisher's website, rocksmillspress.com. On my website, johnpassfield.ca, you'll find two books. You just click on the cover icon and there they are to read. One's a planning notebook and one's a reflective journal. Both of them discuss not only L.M. Montgomery and her novels, but they also discuss the novel as a device for exploring life as we know it, we humans here on the planet, and many other topics. So have a look if you're interested. Lastly, I'll just say thank you for watching this video.